This is the Better Software Faster podcast, where we deep dive into the intersection of tech and business to demystify, unravel, and explore concepts that you can apply to your own organization. From pipelines to processes, forecasting to fine-tuning, best practices to balance sheets, we draw on all of our customer-facing experience to bring you the best high-level talking points. Hello, welcome to the BSF podcast. I'm your host, Adam Godwin. Today we're joined by our CEO, Miro, and our COO, Amos. And we'll be talking about generative AI applications in the workplace, how you can have strategic business initiatives surrounding AI, and talk about some specific use cases as well. Gentlemen, greetings.
Hey there.
So we'll start off just by giving a very kind of quick high-level summary of the subject, and then we'll move straight into a question. How would you define kind of generative AI in a business context? And what are some of the problems that businesses face that could only be solved with Gen AI?
Well, generative AI being a subset of artificial intelligence, it's really concentrated on generating content, whether that's text, images, videos, sounds, right? And I think from a business perspective, it's really about generating content that a business can use to further its marketing objectives, serve customers better, find new markets, that kind of thing. So I think, in terms of the challenges that a business can solve with AI and only AI, I think around the challenges, we've also got opportunities and huge opportunities. Take, for example, an AI agent, something that a business can use to better serve their customers with a very well defined and very knowledgeable agent that knows everything about the business's products or services and is able to have a very realistic conversation with a potential customer. And that's something that we see quite a lot with organizations currently as just a single implementation of Gen AI and large language models.
Obviously, over the last decade or so, we've seen quite a few different buzzwords in the tech world coming out. People talking a lot about crypto. We had the metaverse. We had NFTs. We had blockchain. In your opinion, is this a paradigm shift or is it just another fad?
Yeah, I'll pick this up. I genuinely don't think it's another fad for any number of reasons. And as someone who's been in the tech industry for a very long time, I can point back to real inflection points where we can see that things were going to change for everyone forever. And starting right at the beginning, we're looking at the implementation of email. Doesn't sound much, but when it didn't exist before, it had a massive impact on individuals and organizations. And then you step forward to the implementation of local area networks and the management of local area networks, and then the distribution of PC architecture on those networks that then became wide area networks. And then, so you get to see the distribution of data and email and all of the other bits and pieces that starts to build on that. And then you move forward just a couple of years and the internet exists out of nowhere, which again changes everything. But it changes everything in a way that is better because of what came before it. You move on further than that and you see the advent of not just mobile technology, but data, access to data on mobile technology and smartphones, in particular around 2010, again, that changed everything. And I think this is another inflection point, not just from a technological point of view, but for society in general. I think it is going to have such a long-term, deep and wide impact on what we as a species do and how we do it because of everything that's gone before us and the availability of data and services and platforms that it will in some cases change everything forever. But if you go back for 30, 35 years and look at how you felt that email was going to change everything, emails had a significant impact. How many emails have been sent since that very first one? Like hundreds of billions, right? Not all good ones. But it did change everything. And every implementation on top of that, on top of these new framework inflection points have had the same thing. This is a massive quantum step in terms of what's coming next. It is not a fad. There are all kinds of things that come on the in between that you think might change the world. And you've mentioned quite a few of them, crypto being one of them. Not done it. All right. This is very, very different gravy. Changes everything in my view.
Just looking back a few years when blockchain was making its grand entrance into the world and the world of enterprises and the world of technology, I remember working in projects where blockchain was an afterthought, right? It was used to raise the investment in the first place, but then the delivery teams were tasked with the job of actually finding the use case for blockchain in our particular product, right? And obviously blockchain being a technology that has great benefits. Of course, crypto is, while it hasn't necessarily made its grand entrance into the enterprise world, bar a few great examples around exchanges and token raises and things like this. Crypto might be the most successful implementation of blockchain in itself, right? But that's not something that we're seeing in AI, as in the lack of real world use cases. I think in the world of AI now, we're seeing the immediate real world use cases and real world benefits for organizations. Definitely was not the case the last round, right? So I think there's a very, very clear difference there.
And didn't you feel at the time, I always thought that blockchain was infected by crypto, and that people thought the two things were just joined at the hip, and because of that, and there was a lot of skepticism around crypto, that blockchain never really got the recognition it deserved as an extraordinary invention and idea, but people kind of felt and shied away from it because they felt that it was a function of crypto rather than a completely independent function in and of itself. Did you feel that? Do you think that?
Well, I think blockchain as a technology is kind of the enabler for things like crypto, right? As in cryptocurrency, there are multiple definitions for crypto as such, right? But obviously, I think as a humanity, we've struggled to find the right use case for blockchain, right? And more often than not, it's been something that we try to shoehorn into an existing product, completely missing the point around the distributed fashion of it to provide validation and immutable way of storing data, right? So it's been an interesting thing and a good example of how things go wrong in this space, right? And we struggle to really take advantage of new technologies, which we absolutely did with blockchain. Now, obviously, the technology hasn't gone anywhere, and I think we'll continue to look for the best use case for it, apart from cryptocurrency, right? But for like I said, for AI, all the possibilities, especially for generative AI, are already there, and they're very largely already being used by organizations.
Yeah, we're certainly seeing the AI is already fairly ubiquitous. If you open up WhatsApp, you've got Copilot built into the keyboard now. If you go to Bing Images, you have your option to generate images there. Obviously, the generative AI chatbots are already well in sway. So let's talk a little bit about how companies can actually leverage this and make use of it. Starting with, what would be a pathway to integrate generative AI into the strategic direction of the company, rather than just having it as a separate tool in a toolbox somewhere?
Well, I think Amos will agree, but having a strategy in the first place is probably the starting point, right? Have a very systematic exercise to identify what are the opportunities for you, what are the risks for you, and what is the way for you to experiment with generative AI. What's your AI proof of concept to see whether it adds value to your business or not, right? Apart from that, with emerging technologies like generative AI, I think it's really about reviewing the capabilities on an ongoing basis, right? For some parts of your business, you might look at a strategic horizon of, say, 24 months, right? But for AI, that is way, way too long, right? Everything will be very different in the world of Gen AI in 24 months. So you need to be reviewing all of these things much quicker than that.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think there's it's not just a buzzword or being holistic when you mention, that you should have an AI strategy, because every organization should have a strategy. It doesn't matter how big or how small it is for most things, including technology. But just to go back to something that we said earlier on, we talked about different inflection points throughout the era of technology. But if you think about it now, how obvious would it be to have a web strategy? How obvious would it be to have a mobile strategy? Of course you would want one. Well, of course you need an AI strategy, right? It makes perfect sense. Don't look back at this in 2 years' time and say you should have had one. You need one now, right? Because you can either be a leader or a follower, right? And this will have an impact on future revenue, on future profitability, and future commerciality. These things are important. So many new players coming into the marketplace right now. And I think maybe if you look at how you would look to implement this, or the ways that it could impact your existing target operating model inside your organization, the thing that you do that impacts everything that your customers see and hear, I think it's pretty well recognized that there are 3 or 4 categories of how AI can have a really strong impact on those functions. And it breaks down to things like, for instance, intelligent process automation. Well, process automation has been around for some considerable period of time. But if you bookend process automation with intelligence, right, particularly artificial intelligence that can be scripted and function and be dynamic and agile, then you can turn what is already a well-worn path for an automated process into an extremely valuable one that can start making independent decisions based upon whatever data may or may not be around at that point in time. And depending upon your organization and how you implement these types of processes, you should very, very seriously be considering this right now, particularly if your processes are mature, because there's always a next step to this. Second thing to consider is optimization. AI has long been touted as a model that looks at output, and Miro described Gen AI very well in terms of content and other bits and pieces. But what we really mean is output. It doesn't just have to be content. And output from an optimized function or an optimized decision or an optimized set of decisions is something that Gen AI can do extremely well, right? And we looked at, there was a conversation around when people first started to look at the salesman's problem about how deliveries were structured. When it was possible to use navigation for the first time, this came up as a challenge for people to solve. Well, you take that now to the next level across your entire organization and looking at 100 or 1,000 different variables about what's coming in and what's going out and when, and building that in an automated fashion on top of an existing automated process allows you to optimize something in a way that a human would really struggle with and an algorithm on its own can't do. So optimization is another area that you should really be looking at through that lens for your organization, depending upon what it is. And then a third one would be data harvesting and summarization. Data harvesting, because you can ask an AI to go and consume data or go and retrieve or harvest data from any number of sources. Given the type of information that you're looking for, it'll go and get it for you. And then once it's got it, maybe put it in a data lake or done whatever you want with it, then it can start to summarize it in a way that may be useful for you. So you don't know what you don't know. So go and find it, go and get it, and then bring it back in a summarized way, and then decide what you want to do with it. But the other way to look at this is that you can use all of these different types of categories to manage data and to manage relationships with customers, or to automate processes, and you can intermingle all of these categories simultaneously. And what Miro mentioned earlier about chatbots, et cetera, these vertical agents, as they're called now, are really the veneer on top of a strong set of process management with very, very clear knowledge systems, some of which are created by the organization, some of which are harvested elsewhere in real time. This is where all of this is going. And if you don't think you need a strategy for that, then good luck to you, because I think you do.
We've talked a little bit about data there, and that's definitely a point to touch on, because the obvious use case is, companies generating these massive data lakes, and how the hell do you wrap your head around it. Companies will have huge teams of business analysts whose sole job is to make sense of all of that information. But it sounds like, with the generative AI tooling, you can do it with a much, much lower overhead. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of skill sets that you'd actually need to pull off this kind of implementation. What sort of people would you need within your organization? What kind of skills would they need to be able to implement something like that?
I think there are kind of two main things that we see organizations pondering at this very moment in terms of their AI implementations. Should we go straight to the deep end, hire machine learning specialists and start building our own LLMs to be able to meet our use case? Or should we get people who actually understand the landscape on a much higher level and know what kind of existing technologies and existing tools we should patch together to build our use case? And I think the vast majority of organizations will see benefits from the latter approach much quicker than starting to actually dive into the deep end of creating models or even, to be honest, fine-tuning models where there's so much existing tooling already in place, and that marketplace is growing by the second at this very moment, right? So I think in terms of skills, really what most organizations will see more benefit of is the ability to integrate existing tooling with haste, right? And build certain small parts that will provide the unique benefit for your use case, not necessarily trying to boil the ocean by building everything from scratch, right? But integrating, for example, OpenAI tooling with your in-house data warehouse and so on. I think those small bits and pieces are the ones that really make the difference here.
Yeah, I think Miro's exactly right there. And I think AI is here to stay. And because of that, what you really desperately need to do, apart from having a strategy, is to start to dip your toe in it in a way that you feel that you can consume it and understand it, and it will add value as soon as possible. I can see that when you specifically look at skills and you look at the roles of people inside your organization, that functional requirements inside your team are starting to become abstracted. And let me explain that in a little bit more detail. You may have process sets that are very data science oriented right now with teams that are fundamentally done by the same people. All right. When you start to incorporate AI and the summarization and the optimization and the intelligent process functions in AI, even with some of the existing tools that are available right now, before you build any of your own, you can start to abstract those functions away from the skill sets of the people that you already have. Now, in future, it means that you'll be hiring people with those abstracted skills independently, because you won't need to do the data manipulation for them. But that's not where we are right now. So if you start toe dipping into the marketplace and look to carve out the areas that you can get the most value for with your existing teams, then you'll get a lot of value from this very, very quickly. Because everybody's use cases for these tools is different, but there are underlying themes which are really, really valuable, are already well-worn paths that you can see a route to, and your teams can take on board very, very quickly and make a real difference inside your organization.
Well, with regards to starting, if we're talking about specifically by using off-the-shelf things like Miro, you mentioned OpenAI tooling. Who would lead the charge with regards to this, and who would sort of own it as you move forwards? Would it fall into classic CTO territory? Is there scope for a CAO at some point? Who owns the AI journey within a business?
Well, I think there needs to be strategic oversight. I think it needs to be an EMT thing to understand what the opportunities are, understand where the risks are. But in regards to the actual implementation, we usually see this being owed by definitely the CTO side of things, digital teams, software delivery teams who are working with the company's products and who can readily integrate AI capabilities in these products, right? Of course, some organizations are looking to integrate AI into their internal tooling, where the team might be different from a typical digital team. We might be talking about internal IT teams and such. But really, I think it needs to be a vertical exercise in the organization with the highest level of sponsorship, like many technology transformations. This only has a chance of succeeding when it's something that the whole organization buys into.
I completely agree with that. I would go even further to say that if you're a CTO, you may be a pretty cool tech bro, but actually you need to be strategic at heart. And this is a strategic initiative, well, maybe one of the biggest ones you will ever come across in your career. So without doubt, as a strategic technology initiative, it must sit in the remit of the CTO. Now, you may have, depending on the size of your organization, people beneath you that own specific parts of that and are responsible for its execution. But in general, the technology strategy for your organization or for the products that you deploy, if you're a technology business, must be under the control of the CTO because it's a very strategic thing. I've got no doubt that organizations will try very hard to overcomplicate this, and you will have loads of brand new AI-oriented roles. But in my opinion, this is no different than any other part of the fabric that makes up a new strategy, because new functions come in and are available across the board all the time, and they're not just based for around technology, and they need to be owned at a senior level, and it needs to be managed by a team, and it needs its place, and its place, in my view, is with the CTO.
When a CTO would bring this on board, would there be scope for sort of displacing of other things? Because we're talking a lot about, what the AI can do for you in terms of optimization, in terms of efficiency. But does that mean that things need to be removed from the equation as well? Does it make certain parts of the process redundant?
I think it can do, but in the best words of most lawyers I've ever met, it depends. So I think what you're going to have to consider is the situation for each individual organization. I think once people get, 3 years is an extremely long time in this market in general. But if you bring AI into the equation, it's a lifetime. But in 3 years' time, the sheer number of tools available to change how your work patterns exist will be quite mind-boggling. But really, what are you doing? You're commuting a human doing a series of functions into paying a subscription, because every single one of those will be subscription oriented. We already have subscription chaos, right? Where there are so many subscriptions throughout an organization, it's hard to know what's what and what value you're getting from it or where it all fits together. So I see this getting worse, not better. So there's a lot of consideration to be done. But when you look at it at face value, strategically, you now have to start looking at the peripheral edges and look straight at the biggest areas, the material areas that are going to make the biggest difference to you over time. And so if you look at this independently, without the advent of AI, and said, if we could automate or automate these three things, it would increase our net margin by 25%, right? And you now have two choices. You either wait for somebody to deploy that for you, and it won't be exactly what you want because it'll be generic for how they sell it in the marketplace, or it will be delivered by 7 different components instead of one, or you take a proactive approach of bringing that window closer by building it yourself. Not only are you creating intellectual property, but actually it's not as difficult maybe other people perceive it to be, and you will get exactly what you want. You could then subsequently monetize that by selling it to third parties if you so chose to do so and be part of their subscription list. But it's been ever thus, because you've always had the opportunity to build what people describe as bespoke software for a line of business applications. This should be no different. So don't immediately think you've got to wait for the market to build something before you can use it, because you genuinely don't. And so for me, it does depend, but it depends on what really is going to move the needle for you. Don't just look at the market in general.
With regards to kind of building an implementation strategy and actually implementing generative AI into your processes, what are the kind of metrics and what are the areas that need to be monitored and measured to sort of make sure that this is successful? How would you measure success in an AI world?
I think for like any implementation of an emerging technology, you measure the outcomes, right? You measure the business outcomes and the business benefits of it. You don't measure the number of tokens that you get out of it. obviously, something that might drive your ongoing cost analysis, but it's really, really dependent on your use case for Gen AI. If you are using Gen AI to replace a previously manual process, then you're talking about time savings, you're talking about cost savings, and that's what you measure, right? If you use Gen AI to create a new AI agent that will serve your customers better and be able to remove or reduce queuing times for your customers, then that's what you measure. You measure customer satisfaction, right? And the delta and the improvement of customer satisfaction.
I agree. Going back to the whole theme here around it being a strategy, not a tactic. If it's a strategic objective, the one true test of it being an objective is that it has a smart, measurable series of outcomes. Because if you can't measure it, it's not a strategy. It's not part of your strategy. So that's really the first place to start. Before you do anything, how is it going to make a difference? Why are we doing this? Are we doing it for the sake of it because somebody wants to look at the bright new shiny thing? Or are we doing it because we genuinely feel it's going to make a difference? And there's either a FOMO from a competitive point of view, or a requirement from a customer point of view, a market perception, etc., etc. These are all valid things to consider why you would do it in the first place, not because it's nice and cool and everybody seems to be doing it. So I completely agree. The measures are totally unique. You could have dozens of them, and that's fine. But you also then need to be ruthless, because not everything you think about or that you try to implement from an AI point of view is going to be valuable for you. Yet it's still going to cost you money. So you need to consider that independently and make ruthless decisions about whether you should continue with some threads or some implementations or some objectives if they don't prove to be the value that you perceive them to be to begin with. You'll still learn, but you may not implement them over long term.
And would you have any recommendations or suggested starting points for a CEO who's maybe listening to this who doesn't know what the first step in the process would be?
Well, I think starting with a strategy that can be a high-level strategy, right? That can be something that you iterate on as you go on. That's perfectly fine, but you need to have a strategy. Something that we've seen that works really well in this space is coming up with a proof of concept. What is the smallest improvement or smallest additional feature or smallest standalone thing that we can do with AI and Gen AI, and deploy it as part of our existing product landscape, and then measure, prove that it does exactly what we planned for it to do, right? It improved customer satisfaction. It saved us some cost. Ensure that you build something that is as small as possible for you to see that the needle moves, and then make sure that you actually see the needle as it moves.
I agree. I mean, the way to dip your toe in this is very, very important, because it can get very expensive very quickly, and you want to see not so much immediate gain, but you want to understand potential before you decide to invest further. And if I was to take your question literally, Adam, I wouldn't expect the CEO to actually have a fully briefed understanding of what the possibilities are. And what I would do is I'd pick up the phone to my CTO and say, I'd like the outline of an AI strategy within the next 4 to 6 weeks, so that we can go away and figure out what this might look like, because they'll be closer to it. They'll be closer to understanding the technology, and therefore closer to understanding what is possible. So put them in charge of what is a strategic objective that belongs inside their kennel, and get them to bring you an idea of what the possibility could be, so you could see it in your own terms relating to your own organization. And then as a team, not only can you become educated about this, which is something a lot of people miss and forget about, but you can then start to hone in as an organization on the things that could really move the needle or make a difference for you. And then, going back to what Miro said, start to figure out what the POC should be, where the focus should be. And as you start to dip your toe, you'll start to become more confident and comfortable that the direction of travel is the right one.
Okay, and just to round off then, with this year specifically, we've seen the release of GPT-3, we saw GPT-4 and GPT-4o. Every single release, we're increasing the complexity of the responses, the ability to retain information and context between responses, and bringing down the latency to the point where it can now have conversations pretty much in real time. Where do you see this headed? What's the direction? What's the ceiling, if there is one?
Well, what you've mentioned is a great example of the of how fast the technology is improving, right? I think the rate of change will only get faster and faster, right? So you really need to be able to hold your finger to the pulse, right? See what the art of the possible is on a continuous basis, not every 2 years, right? And really continuously evaluate what are the benefits for you in your business to take advantage of this, because I can guarantee you your competitors are doing it as well, right? So if you don't really strike it while the iron is hot, somebody will, right? And somebody will come and disrupt the industry you're in, right? So yeah, I think to kind of close it off, it is really something that you need to be very aware of, and it's something that you need to be continuously integrating within your business to find the real use case that changes the world for you, right?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And if you just look back in the last 6 months and all the changes that has come and all of the startups that have been created and funded in that period of time, and you're never going to be able to get across all of them or see all of those use cases, but there are tens of thousands of them, in the same way that there are tens of thousands of LLMs now. But we still have big players to come into the market. AWS are building Olympus, which will be a trillion parameter LLM, and that's supposed to be available around Christmas time. But what's the point? Why are they doing this when there's so many of them out there already? But this is one of the other facets to AI, which is unique to this particular technological inflection point, is that they are building a substructure for us, which is already completely commoditized. And it's commoditized because that's the only way they can make money from it, because that's how they're all doing it. And now you can sit on top of that skyscraper and start building your own technology on the basis of something that is already there and already magical and brilliant in its capability. This is why speed to market can be so quick for new startups and existing organizations if they want to bring AI into their world. And it's another reason why, if you don't do it quickly, you genuinely will be left behind. You can't wait 24 months and expect to be able to pick this kind of thing up later, because it will be done already. It will be finished, and it will be moved on to the next level and the level after that. So change will be rapid. Hundreds of players, all the big players are in it. Google are in it. Meta is in it. So expect them to see and start to stimulate the market to deliver brand new products and threads alongside everything that they've already done. Because guess what? It's all about making money for them too, right? So they're putting the big bucks into the creation of the language models, so other organizations can take components that work for them and go make money, and everybody's happy.
That's a fantastic introduction to the applications of AI as part of a business strategy, and it really does sound like, without being too much of a broad brush, it does sound like if you're not jumping on the train now, potentially you're already late. So if you're not jumping on now, you may be left in the dust entirely on this specific point. We'll probably have another one of these on the subject, but for now, I think we'll leave it there. Miro, Amos, thank you both very, very much, as always.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And if you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, you can find us at release.works/podcast. We're also on Spotify and YouTube, StreamYard, and RSS as well. Thank you both very much, gentlemen. We'll see you on the next one.
Cheers.